When we are confronted with violence in the world, you've probably heard someone say, or you maybe have said this yourself, we throw our hands in the air and we say, well, it's human nature. One of the biggest myths surrounding war and other forms of organized violence is that human beings are inherently violent. This leads us to believe that war is inevitable, and some even argue biologically necessary. Believing this myth can make peacebuilding seem at best naive and at worst pointless. It also serves as a way to justify why violence persists, why human beings inflict harm upon one another. This is a myth that we as peacebuilders must dispel, and that we must counter with scientific evidence so that we can definitively state that violence is not our human nature. Luckily for us, the science looking at the human propensity for violence and war has already been gathered and presented in a document called the Seville Statement on Violence. The Seville Statement on Violence was drafted by an international committee of scholars at the 6th International Colloquium on Brain and Aggression held at the University of Seville, Spain, in May 1986. The top 20 scholars from around the world, representing the fields of biology, psychology, neurophysiology, and psychiatry, concluded on these 5 propositions. First, it is scientifically incorrect to say that we have inherited a tendency to make war from our animal ancestors. In fact, intraspecies violence can only be found in a small fraction of all animal species. And making tools specifically for war and organized violence is something that is totally unique to the human species. This means that war is a cultural phenomenon. It is not biologically determined. As peacebuilders, we are then supported by science when we recognize that the culture of violence can be changed and rejected in exchange for a culture of peace. Second, it is scientifically incorrect to say that war or any other violent behavior is genetically programmed into our human nature. A person's genetic makeup has the potential to develop in a multitude of ways, and the potential is in part determined by the social and environmental conditions in which they exist. As the document states, quote, "While genes are co-involved in establishing our behavioral capacities, they do not by themselves specify the outcome." This means that as peacebuilders, we are supported by science in helping to create environments and social structures that reduce the likelihood that a genetic predisposition to violence will be actualized, and increase the likelihood that a genetic predisposition to peace and nonviolence will be actualized. Third, it is scientifically incorrect to say that in the course of human evolution, there has been a selection for aggressive behavior more than for other kinds of behavior. When looking at all species of animals, those that have been able to thrive and evolve have done so as a result of their ability to cooperate and to fulfill important functions relevant to the group's social structure. In fact, violent and hyper-aggressive members of a species group are actually disruptive to the social structure of that group, and as a result, they are oftentimes driven out of that group. This means that as peacebuilders, we are supported by science in looking to more cooperative and less aggressive members of a group when finding ways to maintain stability and ensure the survival and wellness of a community. Fourth, it is scientifically incorrect to say that humans have a, quote, violent brain. Human beings clearly have the capacity to commit acts of violence. However, our brains are not wired to automatically respond with violence. In fact, the gift and power of the human brain is that we have the ability to filter stimuli before we act. This means that we have to condition ourselves to respond violently. So as peace builders, we are supported by science in developing programs and educational systems that condition our brains to interpret stimuli in healthier ways and to then respond with nonviolence. And lastly, it is scientifically incorrect to say that war is caused by instinct or any single motivation. We have confused instinct with traits and belief systems that have been trained in us or conditioned in us. As the document states, quote, "The technology of modern war has exaggerated traits associated with violence, both in the training of actual combatants and in the preparation of support for war in the general population." As peace builders then, we are supported by science in supporting and elevating cultural practices that counter the violence narrative and empower people to resolve and manage conflicts without resorting to violence. The document concludes with a powerful statement that as peace builders we must always remember, quote, "Just as wars begin in the minds of men, peace also begins in our minds. The same species who has invented war is capable of inventing peace. The responsibility lies with each of us."